wanted to kick off listening to all three of you. There's so many interesting connections there that show the value of a different kind of leadership than we sometimes see modelled on the international and national stage. I'm wondering if you can give us an example of maybe where you've worked with a leader who wasn't like that, and then how it felt working with someone who was further onto that level, and how those two experiences impacted on you. Does anyone want to jump in on that? You don't have to use names.
You want us to name names?
Well, yes, of course I do, Tim. I am a journalist.
I can think of one, Catherine, one example when I was chair of my firm's diversity committee, and somebody thought it was a good idea to get together all the managing partners or chief executives of the large law firms in town to have a discussion about how we could improve the number of female partners and members of senior management teams. Very large table, very lengthy discussion. My CEO was sitting next to me, and he said nothing for the longest time, which with great respect to him is a little uncharacteristic. And at the end he said, do you know, I've listened to all of this and nobody said what the real reason is, and the real reason is that it's just the right thing to do. And that pretty much ended the discussion. For me, that was just a high-five moment. I could have grabbed him and kissed him, but I resisted the temptation.
That would have been very kind, yeah.
It was wonderful leadership for me, uncalled for, unsolicited, but truly from the heart.
Yeah, and very impressive, no doubt, yeah. Any other good or bad experience?
So just, Catherine, and talking about a time before I was on the board of Lendlease, so this is something from, in a sense, from history. And if you go back before this decade, Lendlease was operating all over the globe, in many different countries, and in many of those countries was obliged by local law to operate through joint ventures in a way that it didn't manage directly the workforce. And organisations can talk about being passionate about safety and caring for their people, etc. But in that environment, when you're removed from managing the front line, we were experiencing, on average, around 7 fatalities, reportable fatalities a year. And Steve McCann and the leadership team took a view that this was completely unacceptable, and the only way to deal with it, having tried many other ways, was to withdraw from those countries. And they withdrew from a whole range of countries around the world, leaving profitable businesses, profitable contracts on the table, because at the end of the day, the safety of our people was the higher order issue. And grabbing some wood here, we haven't had a corporate reportable fatality now for 4 years. And it just showed me the power of really doing the right thing, as Christine said, has got to override everything else, because the message that then sent through the organisation about this team is genuinely serious about safety.
Yeah, I've only ever worked under one boss. Here's a confession. I too was a lawyer, but I escaped. And 15 years a lawyer. And my first boss, when I did articles, was a great leader. He actually said, there's not too many mistakes you can make that are irretrievable, so have a go. And that actually, for my personality style, was just fantastic opportunity for learning, that light touch, where I respect that you're going to make mistakes. That's the way you learn. Most of us prefer success and never making mistakes, but we rarely learn that way. We learn from the process of our mistakes. And his ability to pull me back when I made mistakes and not tick me off and teach me to learn was quite extraordinary. Doing the right thing with commercial pressures, if I can just say this, is really difficult. So I've never been in the commercial world apart from law, but I certainly have witnessed many illustrations of what was allegedly the encounter between George Bernard Shaw and this attractive woman. He said to her, "Will you sleep with me for £10,000? And she was, that's $1 million. She was overwhelmed, she agonised, and she said yes. And he said, "Good. Will you sleep with me for 1 shilling and 6pence? And she was outraged. She said, "That's disgusting. What do you take me for?" He said, "We've already established that. We're just haggling over price." And when it's £10,000, $1 million or whatever, it's interesting how the ethical issues, doing the right thing, are quite tricky. They're very tricky, because it puts safety first, but what about the people out of jobs because Lendlease withdraws, not to mention shareholder profit? When the ethics are just 1 shilling and 6pence, none of us actually ever find it difficult. Probably the ethical issue didn't change. All that changed was the price tag, the commercial opportunity. But it's interesting how the commercial opportunity does actually shape our ethical view of what doing the right thing is. I don't pretend I know the answer to that, but I've certainly witnessed in business doing the right thing is often very, very hard, particularly when there's commercial downside to it.
Because that can be incredibly difficult. When I was writing the article, I interviewed Simon Longstaff from the St James Ethics Centre, and he made the point that he's been called in many times to different kinds of businesses, and they have a rainmaker, someone who's making a lot of money, and let's just say is not behaving in a kind manner, and in fact can go on for years. And he said, and people think, "Oh, we can't get rid of them, we know it's not the right behaviour." And he said invariably when they do, they found morale and productivity lifts. But that can be a difficult one to confront, can't it? So if you're working with someone who's highly successful, possibly charismatic, as you pointed out, Michael, so to all intents and purposes is doing well, but is not a kind leader, how does one tackle that on a personal level? How do you watch that and confront that or draw attention to it? Because that can have personal negative penalties, can't it?
I think it sounds in a sense difficult, but I think it's pretty straightforward. If you're genuine about the culture that as a leader, and leadership starts at the very top with the CEO and the board, and somebody is not behaving according to the values that you've established, there are a couple of things. Firstly, everyone in the organisation knows about it, so they know who the individual is. They're all sitting there looking to see what's going to be done. And so if you're serious about either preserving or changing the culture, you have to deal with that individual, because by dealing with them is actually absolutely, as you just said, Simon said, that the people say they're serious. They really do genuinely mean this. And they've got rid of one of their high producers, but they are genuine about the behaviours mattering. And what certainly is, in my experience, is at the end of the day, you're better off. And the same with Tim doing the right thing in terms of if there's been an issue, say customers have been handled badly or whatever it may be. In the world we live in, that's always found out. And the more companies try and defend, and very often with legal advice, that settling this matter will create a precedent and you'll be overrun with claims, etc. But the reality is, if you do the right thing, get out there very quickly, deal with it, your customers impress because they know everybody makes a mistake and it's the way you handle the mistake that matters. You save all the costs, you save all the odium of being dragged through the media, being dragged through the courts, when at the end of the day, organisations typically cave. It may be 2 or 3 years down the track and they've incurred all this agony along the way. So why not deal with it right at the beginning, impress your customers, and as importantly, impress your staff so that they know you are serious about doing the right thing.